Hello, I'm James Holland, and I just want to tell you about my brand new TV series, Normandy 44, D-Day and the Battle for France. It's the first release from new production company Typhoon Pictures, and the start of a slate of new and fresh films and series focusing on World War II. The approach is a simple one. No dumbing down. No repeating what's been watched over the previous 15 minutes. Not filling screens with old archive that's been seen over and over. And instead, getting down to the nitty-gritty detail and showing viewers stuff they don't already know. Yet, with all the high-level production values everyone should expect from the best television productions around. Normandy 44, based very much on the research I did for the book of the same name, sees me hooking up with ex-US Army Ranger Dr. Mike Simpson and touring not only the beaches but the wider Normandy battlefield in a fresh and original series that, we hope, finally does justice to the scale and complexity of an epic, brutal campaign. To see this series, all you've got to do is go to www.normandy44.info. That's normandy44.info. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy it.
Attention! Attention! Attention, which is, of course, English for Achtung, Achtung.
Ah, at last.
At last. It's taken us about a year. Given nobody seems to be paying any attention whatsoever at the moment, I thought it might be a good idea to use the old mother tongue. For some people, life remains the same. James, for example, is still in his home office completing his latest masterwork on Sicily, so no change there.
Yep.
I, on the other hand, am trapped in my office getting hairier by the hour. There's not much call for a pub landlord when they've shut all the pubs. Oh, my God, my crisps, my beautiful crisps. Anyway, welcome, friends, to We Have Ways of Making You Talk, the podcast, which will continue through the current crisis. Don't think you can get away from us that easily. Now, there's no tunnelling out of We Have Ways of Making You Talk and scattering the dust in the exercise yard. It will, of course, contain coded messages for our operatives trapped on mainland Europe, especially those choosing to self-isolate on a Spanish beach. Now, we promised you extra content, and we've been as good as our word. I hope some of you are enjoying Zeno's magnificent novel, The Cauldron, about the men trapped at Arnhem fighting at Oosterbeek. It's been released a chapter a day on our regular podcast feed, and it's well worth a listen. And last night, the chapter I read last night, goodness me, I thought I was never going to get out of Oosterbeek last night. Blimey. There's a long chapter in the middle full of, because it's an action-packed novel, but there is a long chapter in the middle where he basically spends time on the main protagonists, where they were all weighing up their relationships with one another and all that. And I got stuck. I got stuck last night. Oh, it's bad. Anyway, and then it's that thing when you're doing an audiobook, you suddenly realise the page turn is the end of the chapter, and you think, oh, brilliant. I can stop.
I can get there. I can actually go to bed.
Exactly. I can go. It's exactly it last night. I can go to bed now. Thank God. Anyway, let's get started, shall we? I'm going to call in James using the only code appropriate. Broadsword calling Danny Boy. Broadsword calling Danny Boy. Over.
Come in, Broadsword. This is Father McCree. That sort of worked, didn't it?
It did sort of work. I mean, one of the problems with their Eagles Dare is they'd never been communicating over open comms like that. I mean, it's just silly.
Yeah, I know.
Even though they're obviously talking it.
Well, there's so many things that are silly about it, but that's not the point.
I think maybe what we could do is we could watch it one evening or afternoon and record the commentary and broadcast that as a We Have Ways Where Eagles Dare special.
Oh, now you're talking. Wouldn't that be fun?
That might be great fun. Maybe we find out. We'll get someone on it. Get one of our orderlies on it and find out. Find out when it's next on Channel 5, or because it's never off the telly. Basically, it's on some sort of deep rotate.
Yeah.
And we'll do a and you have to sit down with a bottle to watch it, I think, and because you got to be as pissed as Richard Burton.
Yeah. There's an amazing novel by Philip Norman, but it's basically a very, very autobiographical novel about his time as a junior journalist working for the Sunday Times magazine in the 1960s.
Right.
And he has to go and interview Richard Burton on set of Where Eagles Dare. And it's one of the funniest episodes I've ever read in a novel. It's absolutely brilliant.
Oh, well, maybe we should dig that up and read that out as well.
We probably need to be on the same...
War, is it?
We need to be on the same sofa for that one.
I think we probably do. So when this is all blown over, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, that's something to to look forward to.
Anyway, we have a heaving postbag this week and a couple of messages I'd like to read out. First up, Tony Cowards. Tony's a comedian friend of mine, a one-liner guy. He's a very, very funny man. And it's very sweet that he likes the podcast. What's been interesting about doing this podcast, actually, is the people who've come out of the woodwork who I know who also have a little burning ember for the Second World War. And that's especially amongst my tribe, the comics.
But it's everyone over. But it's everyone over 45, isn't it?
Yeah, I think basically.
Who's a bloke?
It's everyone over 45, basically. Anyway, he says, currently working on a We Have Ways drinking game to play if you're working your way through the back catalogue. Drink once for James emphasising the operational. God, you're going to make sure it's not hard spirits.
Drink once for Al having a moan about Spitfires and my view on them.
Yes, yeah, you're really down on the Spitfire. Drink once for James saying off the radar, and drink twice for Al getting excited about a tank. I mean, this is a surefire way of getting hammered, isn't it? Excellent. Thanks, Tony.
I don't really know how to respond to that, to be honest. But the operational part is really important, by the way.
Yes, we know. I spent a year being browbeaten about it. All I want to do is, I just occasionally want to talk about the tactical, James. That's all. Just every now and again.
Not asking for much. And this
because let's be honest, on the tactical side, things weren't as ropey as they've been made out either. That's the thing. As a reflection of the operational and the strategic.
Hold on, I've got a cracker from Matt here. He says, "I'd like to submit a formal complaint." Oh dear. I religiously listen to every episode. I find the topics fascinating. Good. Love your personalities and what you both bring to the table. Amazing, thank you. Okay, that sounds good.
Creep. He's overcooking it now.
But every topic leaves me with more areas of knowledge gaps that I need to be filled. That I need to have filled, I think is what he means. Each pod leaves me either directly or indirectly buying a new book. I can't keep up and I'm spending a fortune on books. I've even returned back to RAF Coningsby after Al's visit. Keep up the hard work, lads. Oh, that's a nice message. Well, thank you.
That's very sweet from Matt. Now he knows how I feel. I mean, the amount of reading I've had to do in the last year, like, dear God. I mean, Adam, we've talked about it a little lately. Adam Tooze's book about the Nazi economy, Wages of Destruction, right? There's a lot of economics in that book. Now, I don't know about you, James, right? Because you don't write a lot about economics in your books. But sometimes I'm one of those people, I go to see my bank manager or my accountant, and we only get like a minute and a half, 90 seconds into the conversation, and he can see me glazing over. And some of the financial advice I've had in my life, I don't know if it's been good or bad. I just don't know, because what happens is a minute and a half in, I'm
lost.
It's numbers. I'm lost, exactly. So it's a very good book, that Adam Tooze book, but there's an awful lot of stuff about balance of payments where I'm kind of reading going, yeah, this shit's important. Oh, that sounds bad. And I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
You're exactly, I'm on exactly the same page as you on this one. Anything to do with money, finances, anything like that, I'm just not interested. I mean, obviously I'm interested in having it, but I don't understand it. I don't get it. I'm not constantly looking for the cheapest phone bill or cheapest electricity bill. I just don't care. It's just, it might as well be Esperanto to me as far as I'm concerned. But when I was doing when I was doing the first part of War in the West, I was trying to work out Nazi economics and the 4-year plan and all the rest of it and the Z plan, and trying to work out how Goering and co were doing it. And I was reading Adam Tooze, obviously, and I was also looking through the incredibly dense and complicated and detailed German official histories, which has vast amounts on all this stuff as well.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand. I just do not understand what you're talking about. So I then had to go to my my great old mate from university, and who is also now my next door neighbour, who is a financial whiz, and say, Pete, can you just translate this into normal English for me, please? Can you explain what's going on?
And
I actually sat down and had a proper session with him, and he explained everything to me. And I tried very, very, very hard not to glaze over. And I immediately I recorded it, because I knew that the moment I'd walked out the room, I'd forget everything he told me, because I just can't think like that. And I also made copious notes. And I also bought the I think it was do you know the what was it called, the Idiot's Guide or whatever they're called,
Yeah.
The Idiot's Guide to Economics.
Dummies.
Yes.
Dummies Guide to
Economics for Dummies. I got that as well.
Yeah, I've got that.
And I got A Brief History of Economics. And and so I really, really tried to nail it. And for about a week, I did understand it.
Yeah.
But obviously, if I read Adam Tooze again now, it'd all be gobbledygook again. I wouldn't. It's gone.
Yeah. But this is the thing: is that because when I did my history degree, which is, I've said before, so long ago it actually counts as history, we were offered a statistics module, right? As part of the degree, right? And it was brand new, the statistics module, right? And I've never been I've never been a maths person. Like I say, balance of payments, okay, right? If you say so, right? Like I can watch a budget and go, yeah, he sounds clever, right? I mean, I really am a complete dummy on this stuff. And but I went on the statistics course, and basically what was on the statistics course was a load of people either who knew how this stuff worked, or a load of people thinking this course is brand new, we're going to get a soft mark on this. Right, there's no way. There's no way we're all going to fail a brand new course. But
so you did it.
So I did it, yeah. And so we got, and it's all that correlation and causation and all that sort of stuff that we really got into, that which actually is a thing that then that explains very, very clearly some of what happened in the 30s when the Hitler government comes in and looks like it's rescuing the economy, whereas in fact it's a load of reforms that the Weimar people have put in place. And his miracle jobs recovery is the uptick from that. A lot like Trump's first couple of years of the recovering American economy. In fact, the things Obama had done, because the thing in economics is stuff takes ages. Stuff takes ages to wash through. I mean, it's like the shock, the economic shock we're going to go into now. Who knows where the other end of that may be? Because the government are going, we'll bounce back as soon as this is over. Well, will we? I mean, we're going to, there's only one way to find out, and that's to stay at home, stay indoors, stay safe, ladies and gentlemen, etc. But you know what I mean? It's this sort of that the economics does matter in the end. I mean, after all, all the shipping and the operational side of thing, you've got to be rich and have your ducks in a row and your cash flow and your and John Maynard Keynes over in the US arguing for all that, if you want that to work too, haven't you?
Well, just the fact that you know who John Maynard Keynes is suggests that you've got, you're not a complete...
Yeah, but that's because I'm from near Milton Keynes, right? And the big joke was it had been named after Milton Friedman and Keynes. Whereas in fact it wasn't. It was named, there's a little village called Milton Keynes in the middle of Milton Keynes.
I never heard that. That's just completely brilliant. I love that.
Yeah. That's the economics joke about Milton Keynes.
Yeah, that's very funny. That's very funny.
Well, you see, that's the only times you ever laugh at economics. Anyway, we have another excellent piece of insight now from Neil Webber. In reference to a recent episode, the number 13 is a bad number in Western Christian superstition. Both Japan and the Red Army had a 13th army. Oh, and love the pod. Yeah, that's right. That's quite right. They did, didn't they? And that's interesting that because the Red Army, of course, the Soviets sort of surfed a wage of religiosity, didn't they, in the Second World War? And Stalin relaxed religious, basically, clampdowns and all that sort of stuff during the war, didn't he? As a way of mobilising the Russian people, he kind of let the Orthodox Church cut them a bit of slack, didn't he? So that's quite interesting that nevertheless they had a 13th army.
Well, I think the thing that's really interesting about the thing that's so interesting about the Red Army is just how many different peoples are involved in it.
Yeah.
It's such a vast area. There's
Well, and then after the war, it's painted as a Mother Russia victory. Whereas in fact, you've got people from all the Soviet republics. You've got
people from Kamchatka.
Well, exactly, as ethnically diverse, literally a multicultural army.
Yeah.
Kazakhs, Mongols, all sorts of people. The men that arrive in Berlin are a polyglot, multiracial, multicultural lot, all under the Soviet banner, which is, God, I mean, we barely ever talk about the Eastern Front, but that in itself is a colossal subject.
Yeah, we must. Well, we've got.
This is a bottomless buddy.
We've got plenty of time. We've got plenty of time, but we must definitely get onto this. We must definitely get onto the Eastern Front in a bit more detail at some point. in the not too distant
Yes.
future. That is for sure. But
Yes,
obviously,
we
you're
should.
going to have to do some more
Yes.
reading before then.
Well, I've read up about Kursk. I'm all across the Roman top and stuff.
Oh yeah,
It's all really
yeah.
good. It's all really good. That yeah. Anyway, here's another tweet or email. It says tweet/emails on my script here because believe it or not, folks, there is a script. I mean, there's sort of it's like a fragments really. It's like messages in a bottle sent to us on our desert island of waffle. Right, this is from Rusky279. Hi guys, I've been listening to your podcast for the last year and look forward to it each week. Me too. My question, given the 80th anniversary of Dunkirk, would you be able to tell us more about the 10,000 that were left behind at Saint-Valery? My dad's uncle was in the 51st who were tasked to fight to the last bullet where they stopped the French surrendering twice. Well, this is a sort of because it is quite true. In the Dunkirk story, there's the headline narrative, which is the evacuation at Dunkirk, Dynamo, and the events that lead to Dynamo. But then you do have the 51st. Tell us the story of the 51st. It's the 51st Highland Division, isn't it, James?
Yes. So what happens is the 51st Highland Division are already over there, and that's all fine. And what they're doing in the winter of 1939, beginning 1940, they are rotating British divisions into the Maginot Line, which is this very, very expensive and complicated and technologically advanced series of defences that basically runs southwards, north-south, along the French-German border. And obviously no one's going to be going past that.
And this is an example, actually, of the Anglo-French coalition cooperating properly with each other. Actually, sort of, the units tangled up together, and people talking to each other and sharing resources, which is sort of pretty, which then becomes uncharacteristic the following summer, is that because things become disjointed pretty fast, don't they?
Yes, but it is their turn when where the balloon goes up at the beginning on the 10th of May 1940. So they're already in position on the Maginot Line when all this is happening. So they're not part of the British Expeditionary Force, which is up in Flanders and moving into Belgium at the start of the campaign. And of course, what happens after the end of Dunkirk? That is the BEF in that area, in the Dunkirk pocket. They've gone, but there are still, of course, British troops out there. There's the bulk of the 1st Armoured Division. There's a whole host of other troops which have been on the Southern Line, and there is the 51st Highland Division. And of course, France is still our ally. So just because we've evacuated those from Dunkirk doesn't mean to say that any other troops we've got in France shouldn't then fight as well, because they should, because we are
allies.
part of an alliance, formal alliance with France, we have certain obligations. So 51st Highland Division gets folded into the French 9th Corps and put on the Atlantic coast. So they're moved out of the Maginot Line. And the next phase of the whole campaign is called Case Route, which is Operation Red. Case Yellow was the first part. And this is the sweep south and to kind of finish, the Germans sweeping south and kind of finishing off the whole job. And they come up against Rommel's 7th Panzer Division. And what happens is as they pull back, they're pulling back. They pull back, and the French pull back a little bit too late. So the idea is to kind of get down to Le Havre and get across the river, get across the Seine, and head south. But Rommel outflanks this retreat and cuts in towards Le Havre and Saint-Valery, which is this coastal town just to the north of Le Havre, before they have had a chance to get back across the River Seine. And so they're trapped there. And what then happens is they call in the Navy to come and do an evacuation and get them out of Saint-Valery while they're defending Saint-Valery. And the Navy do so, and I can't remember the name of the naval commander, but he uses his initiative to great aplomb and gets there and has all the ships that are required to lift up the 51st Highland Division are there in place. But there is a terrible fog in the morning of the evacuation, and they simply cannot see anything. They just can't get to the coast, and so they're all get put in the bag.
What are the dates on this? Because
it's the 10th
Dynamo's
of June.
wound down. Right, so it's well after Dynamo. So Dynamo is wound down when by the Dynamo starts.
So Rommel cuts into the coast on the 10th of June. So Dynamo starts on Sunday
Right.
the 26th, but actually the lifting process, it's activate. It's given the green light on Sunday the 26th. It actually starts, the evacuation starts on Monday the 27th. And the British bit of it is finished at about 11:30 p.m. on Saturday the 2nd. But then there's a whole load more French troops. So the whole Operation Dynamo is ended on the 4th of June. So it's just under a week later.
So it's at least it's a week later. So things are very, very different in France a whole week later, and also the focus of the British effort is basically regroup, lick your wounds. The Navy sorts itself out. The Navy's making sure collier convoys can still run. Convoys are still, shipping's still going. The Air Forces, the RAF Fighter Command is sort of regrouping and sorting itself out, and all this. So the focus isn't necessarily on another big evacuation, is it? And this isn't anything like the scale. We're only talking about one division after all, aren't we?
Yeah, we are, because the first Armoured Division does get away because they're not in the same. They're not in the line with the 51st Highlanders, so they're able to get away no problem at all. It's it's sort of betrayed by Churchill, and all this stuff comes out. And I remember I was involved in in making a documentary about it 2 or 3 years ago. And I was asked to be a historical advisor. So I said, yeah, sure. So I had a chat with them all and told them my kind of two penn'orth. And then at the end of it, I was asked to see the kind of rough cuts of the film and pass my comments. And there was all sorts of stuff that could be changed and errors and all the rest of it, which you would expect when you're making a documentary like that. Yeah. And that was fine. But what we couldn't, of course, change was what the veterans were saying, because what a veteran says is gospel, and no one is allowed to ever quibble with it. But they were talking, obviously they were talking very movingly about losing their mates and stuff. But some of the things they were saying was just plain nonsense, with the greatest respect. They were talking about, we were given these absolutely rubbish boys anti-tank guns and, against these absolutely enormous panzers, we hadn't got a hope in hell. And you're thinking, well, I'm really sorry, chum, but with the very greatest respect, you've got, you're up against Rommel, who's got these Czech tanks, and a boy's anti-tank gun is perfectly good against one of those. I mean, they're not enormous panzers by any stretch of the imagination. And it's one of those things that, as time passes on, it's completely understandable. Memory distorts things, and you kind of think of things in a different way. And I'm sure if you were lying on the ground with your Bren gun and even a T-38 was coming towards you, you'd still feel pretty scared. But they did a whole experiment with a boy's anti-tank gun, saying, look at this, it couldn't even get through 40 millimeters of armour plate. Well, that's because it didn't have to in 1940. It absolutely didn't. So
the thing is, though, James, I mean, if you're in that situation and you're cut off in a town, and it's a week since the rest of the BEF buggered off, and you have been the coalition, let's say, has been comprehensively outled, and it's a war of manoeuvre, you might well think there's no point trying to take the tanks on because the tanks are unbeatable. I mean, by this point, if you see what I mean, with memory and experience are coloured by all sorts of things, aren't they? Other than necessarily what's really happening, as it were. After all, we're all going to have very different memories of this experience, aren't we? That may fly in the face of an official account one day down the line. You know what I mean? But you're right. It's very difficult. It's very, very difficult to say to a veteran, no, mate, sorry, you're quite wrong. That didn't happen. You can't do that, can you? So we'll take a break now. We'll see you in a tick. Hello, We Have Ways listeners. It's Al here. A while ago, I asked you if you could help out with something important to me. And it's this. My nephew, Finley, is very unwell with a very rare blood cancer called JMML. And the only known cure is a blood stem cell transplant. So what we need you to do is dead simple. Go to www.dkms.org.uk and log on and find out if you can be eligible to be a blood stem cell donor. It's very simple. All you got to do is rub a swab around inside your cheek, put it in the envelope, send it back to DKMS, and they will find out if you're a tissue match for someone further down the line. It doesn't cost you anything, but you could save someone's life. Thanks very much for listening, and I hope in the midst of all this going on that we're dealing with in the country, you can do something to help someone else. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Now, we don't normally do parish messages in this pod, but I thought it might be right to mention one birthday. A good friend of the show, it was his birthday early this week, and we are, of course, talking about Jumping Jim Gavin, who would have been 113 yesterday, the youngest US commanding general in the Second World War, a lover of lovely ladies including Martha Gellhorn and Marlene Dietrich, jumped 4 times into action, or on one occasion into inaction. But is he remembered for any of this? No, he's not. You failed to capture one bridge.
Well, I've got to say,
Right,
I have been really enjoying writing about Jim Gavin in my Sicily book. I really have. And he's he's absolutely brilliant. I mean, he is completely fantastic in Sicily.
Yeah. But it's like you're right. It's like you're writing a tragedy, James, where hanging later in his, you're on the hubris.
I know.
You're on the hubris bit.
I know, and it's just in the back of my mind all the time, like a sort of persistent tap that I can't switch off because, you were great on the Biazzo Ridge, Jim, but there's Nijmegen, isn't there? He was really good, though. He was, really, really tough, and just, you talk about leading from the front. I mean, he really, really does. And there's this amazing action.
Now, that's something I want to talk about. Leading from the front, right? Because when people like Jim Gavin lead from the front and things work out, everyone goes, what a superstar he was, leading from the front. What an absolute diamond, Fixed bayonets, led from the front, showed his men the way and all this sort of thing. But then when someone leads from the front and they say get killed, like, let's say, General Hopkinson leading 1st Airborne, who's killed... Not in Sicily, but later on in Italy, right?
Yeah.
No one says, what a dude leading from the front, old Hoppy Hopkinson. He showed the world he was boss by leading the front. They go, what an absolute plonker. How irresponsible, how foolish, like Urquhart leading from the front, and he makes a mess of it, and then, for instance... Frank Messervy, his headquarters, who's my new favourite general, by the way, from the Burma book, Burma 44, in all good audio bookstores soon. And Frank Messervy is this amazing general, and if people don't know about him, you should go and find out about him. But he has his headquarters overrun twice, and is captured one time, nearly captured, but cuts his pips off, doesn't he? Or cuts his crowns off, and says, "Oh, I'm a service troop. I'm not really a soldier."
This is in the Western Desert,
and then in the Western Desert, and then evades the Japanese at the admin box, or just outside he's not even in the admin box. The point is, when you lead from the front and it goes well, everyone high fives you and says, what an amazing guy with guts and grit. And when you lead from the front and it goes badly, what an absolute pillock. Because Urquhart is arguably, everything he can goes wrong, does go wrong, and he adds to that at Arnhem, I think, by being, although... Who knows what he'd actually been able to do to influence the course of the battle, actually. Probably not a lot, because the Germans are making the decisions that are making the difference to what happens. No one says, what a gutsy guy, he led from the front and ended up stuck in a loft for a day. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, but I think there are some exceptions to that. Hopkinson, I don't think was very good anyway, and made some really catastrophically bad decisions. And it's very clear from Hopkinson that he might have been a damn good bloke to go and have a G&T with in the mess. But he was so obsessed with glider troops that he lost all sense of any kind of reason whatsoever. He just couldn't see the wood for the trees. It's like, it has to be this way. There is no alternative.
I don't know.
And
he may have insisted in putting gliders on Arnhem Bridge, though.
Yeah, he might have done. Yeah.
Ha!
But he wasn't very good before he got killed. That's my point. But there was another paratrooper in Sicily called Hard-Nosed Gorham. Hard-Nosed Gorham is the commander of the 1st Battalion of the 505th Parachute Combat Team, Parachute Infantry Regiment. Yeah. He's absolutely brilliant. Again, he's one of these guys who's just completely gung-ho, leads from the front, does everything that he would expect his men to do 10 times over. And he decides to try and knock out a Tiger tank with a bazooka and gets killed. And no one goes, what a plonker, he shouldn't have done that. Why on earth is he trying to knock out a Tiger tank with a bazooka?
Well, why on earth was he trying
Everyone
to
just said,
what a plonk.
Because the Tiger was threatening, he was leading from the front, and he was trying to knock it out by the tracks, knock out the tracks. But unfortunately, the Tiger tank, it didn't work. And it was one of those moments where the turret just went,
Yeah.
And that was the end of Hard-Nosed Gorham. But he was, everyone was just. I've never heard or seen a bad word about him anyway, and I've never ever seen any suggestion that he shouldn't have done what he did. So.
Well, I might suggest that he should have been leading his men, not getting himself killed.
Well, yeah, maybe. But anyway, Gavin certainly does brilliantly in Sisley. He's really properly good.
It is really, really interesting, isn't it? Because so much of combat, as you and I know from reading about the tactical end of things, rather than operational, take a drink, right? Rather than reading about the operational end of things, reading about the tacticals, you and I both know so much of it's to do with luck and sheer blind luck. Absolutely nothing to do with you can be as experienced, skilled, wary, or green, completely fresh to it as you want. Luck is an enormous factor, almost to the point where it outweighs absolutely everything else. Keith Douglas, for instance, who we've talked about a lot on this podcast, whose writing we admire and whose accounts of the war we admire, and his unit very, very well, and that they're a fascinating example of how you got guys on horses 1 minute, and by the end he was killed out of sheer bad luck. He wasn't really doing anything wrong. I mean, and then. Before, when we talked about Michael Wittmann, for instance, he had considerable luck. He must have done to have lasted.
A huge amount of luck at Villa Bocage. I mean, he'd have been brown bread then, had it not been for the fact that the anti-tank gunner who had a barrel pointed straight at his Tiger happened to be having a slash at the time he passed, and so on. So this is the thing is that luck is so much a part of all of this that sometimes to say, oh, that guy, because if Hopkinson hadn't been killed, he'd have probably would he have still been that job? He'd have probably been promoted upwards, like everyone in the airborne establishment eventually did, because they had to grow the thing. He might have ended up doing Browning's job the next year. Who knows? Who knows? Sure. It is just fascinating, the idea of luck that we kind of always park, I think, because it's impossible to factor in. I think it is. And I think, it's very interesting talking, if you're looking at Gavin or something, and you look at his writings and stuff, he is talking about the need to be seen to be leading from the front, showing the way forward, leading the way. Yeah. And Paddy Mayne is exactly the same. I've just been writing about him, and when he was commander of what was briefly known as the SRS, but then became one SAS again. But the SRS, the Special Raiding Squadron, their attack on they do this one action where they take out his batteries, and the next action they do a couple of days later is when they attack the port of Augusta, and they just do a frontal attack in landing craft, land in the port, and jump straight up. There's lots of shooting, there's lots of firing. There are descriptions of Paddy Mayne walking down the main drag with his hands in his pockets, and everyone's going, how can he be doing this? Everyone else is sort of crouching, kind of clinging to the walls and sort of peering around corners. He's just wandering down looking casually as you like, and nothing touches him. Yeah. And part of that is to give his men confidence and to just say, look, it's absolutely fine. I can do it. Had it gone wrong, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, well, because it does go wrong. Because there's that. I mean, we're going to talk about the Falklands soon. I hope in a special. We've been talking.
We're going to do a week of specials on the Falklands.
We're going to do
as a one-off,
because there's a story from the Falklands when they. I can't remember which. It's Tumbledown, I think, or Mount Longdon, where they're stuck. Whoever it is, I think it's the guards are stuck, and one of the officers says, it's a night attack and the fire's coming in and there's all these sangers they've got to blow. Yep. And they're thinking, we are stuck here. And one of them remembers an account of the Black Watch in the desert, where an officer stands up, they're pinned down in a similar situation. An officer stands up and says, are we or are we not the Black Watch? And leads a charge, and then it's immediately cut down. And everyone gets up, and then the officer's immediately cut down by an enemy fire. Right? So he's doing the exact thing you're talking about, but it gets him killed. And this guy in the Falklands thinks, all right, I'm going to have to do that then. So does that, and gets his men unstuck. And it's interesting. This leadership thing, that this thing has to be rediscovered basically every time this happens. And you only have, and the other thing is you only have to look at First World War leadership, which actually isn't the way it's been characterised. More generals killed in the First World War than in the Second World War. That if you were an infantry subaltern, you were toast at a far higher rate than anyone else in the army in the First World War. Much higher casualty rate under officers, because they were leading from the front and be seen to be leading from the front, because that was the philosophy. It's this interesting idea, though, that the generals feel they need to do it.
Well, it's very
That's
interesting.
I've
just been looking at this guy called Colonel Wilhelm Schmaltz, who later becomes a lieutenant general. But in Sicily, he's just a colonel, and he's describing his day, and he's describing what he has to do, and it's just so interesting because he sort of gets up before dawn, has to go and talk. The new staff he's got aren't quite up to speed because they're ex-Luftwaffe types in the Hermann Goering division, so he's got to kind of train them. Then he has to go and see everyone. He has to make sure that all the supplies are coming through, that people are being fed up at the front. Then he has to go to his battalions. He has to go and see them. Then he has to go. He has to then get out of his car. He then has to walk up to the kind of advanced posts so that he can see, because he's saying, there's so much going on in modern war now. The days where a general could sit behind a desk, that's all gone. The commander has to be at the front and has to be able to see everything, because he says one of the main reasons for that is he's getting so much conflicting reports. His units are all over the place. And one is saying, I'm in this critical situation. And, he's saying one person's critical situation is another person's quite serious situation, or another person's, bit of a headache, but not too much of a hassle. So he said, you have to kind of be able to get to know your commanders. You have to be able to interpret what they're thinking, and you have to be able to prioritise what is the most important and what isn't. And he said the only way you can do that is going on the ground. So, which is why every single day he's constantly moving back and forth, going from A to B to C to D, all around, never stopping for a minute. And it was just fascinating.
Yeah. Well, all of that from Jim Gavin's birthday. You've been listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. Enjoy your drinking game. Keep calm. Carry on. By the way, a chapter of Zeno's Magnificent Cauldron each day from this week, which will take about 3 weeks, I think, because there's 22 chapters in all. Thanks for listening. Bye for now. Cheerio.
And bye for me. Cheerio.